Greetings to the Venerable Masters. Greetings to all. 尊敬的师父慈悲。诸位同修阿弥陀佛。We are in the Amida Sutra talking about Sariputta, Elder Sariputta, 舍利弗尊者. We have been talking about his life, have been talking about his Dharma, and when we got to the point of the 10 precepts, ทับทิ้งเหยียบดาวหรือ善业, we've been diving deeply into the 10 precepts. All right, let's do a quick recap of where we left off last time. We left off with the 8 precepts. Điều thứ 8 của thập thiện nghiệp đạo, 8 条, 十善业的8条. The 8 precepts, the 8 precept is abstention from greed, 无贪, vô tham. The Buddha explains the cause of greed is when a person wants what others have, thinking, oh, this, that, what belongs to others belong to me and should be mine. So that's greed. Greed, there is an intense desire for something, reaching out to try to possess it, to own it, to control it, with the mental states of greed, lust, longing, desire, thirst, excitement, and passion. So you want to have something because you don't have it. You think that you lack, you don't have it, and so therefore you want to have it. So that's greed. We explained that the state of greed is also a state of perpetual frustration, 苦, 口. The reason it's a state of frustration is because you're trying to have something, you're trying to control something, meaning that you're trying to prevent it from changing. But the nature of the Dharma, the nature of Dharma is forever changing, 无常, vô thường. So when it changes, you're trying to prevent it from changing. Therefore, it leads to dissatisfaction and the frustration because you can never control it. And so when for example, if you have greed for happiness of a new car or a person, whatever, that means that you want to make that happiness yours forever. And so you are not allowing it to change. People change. Cars will get old. The things that you treasure so much will lose their value. And so you're preventing things from changing. You're preventing nature from happening. Therefore, it does not meet your expectation. Therefore, it leads to suffering. Does it make sense? Because you're trying to prevent that new car from changing. That person, your lover, or your partner, your family, your friends from changing. They may have different ideas, they grow, but you want them to stay as they are, how they are, how you want them to be, like your children. You don't want them to become adults. You want them to be cute little children forever so that you can love them. Because if they grow old, you can no longer express your love because they have their own family, so you will not have time to deal with them. So when you have love for your family, you are extracting happiness from that relationship. You are expecting your child to provide you that happiness. And so when they when they no longer provide you that happiness, you get disappointed, you get frustrated. Does it make sense? Okay, so so that's why greed leads to forever frustration. You can never obtain that happiness because by nature it changes. And by preventing things from changing, you are building frustration within yourself. That's why greed leads to frustration and suffering, 苦, 口. Wanting to possess something out of desire is to prevent changing from happening. But impermanence, 无常, vô thường, is natural. Therefore, the result is frustration, 苦, 口. One way to end greed or to overcome greed, 贪, is to see suffering hidden behind greed, like frustration. So that's one way of ending greed, because you know that the more greed you have, the more frustration you're going to have. So that's one way of avoiding greed. The other way of abstaining from greed, 无贪, 无贪, is to practice meditation. In meditation, one does not need to reach out, does not feel like there's a need for me to reach out, to own something, to control something, because one is already satisfied with his current state of being. When you are sitting in meditation, you feel happy. So therefore, you don't feel like you need to pay attention to the new car. You're not paying attention to your family anymore, to your object of desire, because you are happy within your state of meditation. Therefore, that helps you to stop greed, right? So first is to see the suffering behind the greed. Second is to practice meditation to be happy with your current state. Therefore, you don't feel the need, like, I need something, I need happiness, I need somebody to pay attention to me, I need somebody to love me. You don't need that. Therefore, you stop the greed from happening by practicing meditation. Another way, a more positive way to end greed is to realize the joy of generosity. 看得到布施和无贪的安乐, right? Nhìn ra sự an lạc của không tham và sự bố thí. So when you realize that when you give to help somebody and you realize the joy, there is no longer me. I need money, I need a new car, I need this. But you look at other people don't have a home to stay overnight, the cold winter, rainy night. You focus on them, and therefore you no longer have the greed from occurring. Does it make sense? Right? So 3 ways to overcome greed. One is to see the suffering of greed. Second is to practice meditation so that you become meditative. You are blissful in your meditation. 3 is to practice generosity, 布施, bodhi, so that you are helping other people. You are no longer focusing on yourself, your needy self, which you may not need. You already have a car, you already have a house, but you feel like, oh, my car is not nice enough, my house is not big enough. But you compare to a homeless person, they have nothing. And so when you see that, you give rise to compassion, and therefore you can end your greed, right? Okay. Are there any comments or questions about the 8th precept before we move on to the 9th precept? Yes.
What about?
Oh, wait.
What about when you greedy in giving out donation? For example, there was a time I wanted to do something for the sort of suture to do on a carving on the stone. At the time, I didn't have money, and I said, I wish I have that money so I can do that service. And then, is that a part of the greedy because I don't have money, and then I try to get, or I intend to do it when my hands are tied?
It may or may not be greed. Depends. We have to ask ourselves. Sometimes we don't have the means to do something, but we have the desire to do something. So that is healthy because that is the spirit of bodhisattva, bodhisattva. Because a bodhisattva always wants to give, and sometimes a bodhisattva has a vow, much bigger than what he or she can do. Because our aspiration as a bodhisattva wants to help all sentient beings. But like Mr. Chen last night, he mentioned Huizhan, right? Last night he said that it's okay to give rise, to have this big vow, because that is our aspiration. But whether we can help all sentient beings is another issue. You want to help all sentient beings, but in reality, we only have 24 hours in the day, and it's not like we can have 1,000 friends, right? Truly, you can be on Facebook and have 1,000 friends, but how many of those friends are you intimately, care about? Only a few people you can really care about, because to care about somebody is to give time, and we don't have enough time to give to 1,000 or million friends, right? So it's okay to have this, say, I missed this opportunity. And two ways to look at this. One is because I did not cultivate enough merit to have this opportunity. Because a person who has merit, 福报, 福报, he or she will have the opportunity, the resources to do something. For example, let's say that you want to donate to somebody, but you don't have money. But because of that good wish, that certainly your friend gives you money, enough money. So that's a good thing. That's a person with merits, 福报, 福报. So in this case, like the master mentioned, that he wanted to engrave the sutras on a big piece of stone, but he didn't have the means to do so. So two things we can look at it is to recognize that we did not cultivate enough merits to make that happen. But opportunity, meaning did not come to fruition, meaning that it's not our turn yet. Just like when we wish to go to the Pure Land, Sukhabati, Jila Sijek, but we cannot go it. We really want to go there, but we cannot go it, meaning that we do not have enough conditions. There are problems with where we want to go. So meaning our cultivation, Xiuxing, Duhan, has problems. And so that's one way to say, okay, in the past I didn't do enough, and therefore I don't have enough condition, Yuan, to make it happen. Therefore, I will not be disappointed. I will continue to do it because based on conditionality, Yuan Qi Fa, Fa Yin Kai, if you get disappointed, you stop there, you are destroying the momentum of that to happen. Right? So we cannot just because of some incident that should discourage us to continue. Yes, we don't have the means, the resources right now to make it happen, but we should continue to nurture that dream, right? Nuôi dưỡng cái mộng đó, nurture the dream to allow it to happen. So that's the second thing that we can do is, okay, I did not do a good job cultivating in the past, but I do recognize my potential in the future. I can make this happen. So it's not greed. It's greed if you're disappointed and you become jealous. Why is it me? I've been praying for so long. How come it's not happening to me? That's greed. But if to say, I recognize, yep, I did not do a good job in the past, but I have the potential, so I should continue to cultivate. So that is bodhisattva vow, because we are aspired to do something that is beyond our ability. And we should continue to have that aspiration, because your aspiration should always be ahead of your ability to give you room to move. If your aspiration is to help yourself, then that is very limited. Our aspiration should help all sentient beings. It allows us room to move, right? Just like you're driving, if the end of the road is like right in front of you, there's no room to drive. But you want to go far away, so your distance has to be far apart from you and your destination in order for you to move. And therefore, our aspiration, yuan, should always be more than what we can do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any other comments? Thank you for the questions.
Amida.
Okay, so let's dive into today's main presentation. The ninth precept is abstention from hatred. Let's go back to the sutra where the Buddha describes the ninth precept to Kunda, the silversmith. Kunda, so the Buddha described this in two ways. One is from the unskillful mental state, and then the other is from the skillful mental state. So the Buddha says, he bears ill will, corrupt in the resolves of his heart. May these things be killed, or cut apart, or crushed, or destroyed, or may they not exist at all. This is unskillful mental action, 不善的意业. Okay. And then later on in the sutra, the Buddha says, he bears no ill will and is not corrupt in the resolves of his heart. He thinks, may these be free from animosity, free from oppression, free from trouble, and may they look after themselves with ease. So this is skillful. 善的意业，停，英语，为了停英语。The mental states of hatred include doing harm, desire to injure, ill will, anger, evil intention, wickedness, corruption, malice, anger, hatred, and so forth. The real nature of the unskillful mental states, unskillful is 不善, bhakti. Unskillful mental states, 不善的意业, bhakti, 意义, of the ninth precept emerges only when we are able to see the connection between hatred and greed. 看得到贪和嗔的联系, thấy được liên hệ của tham và sân. In other words, to recognize this mental state, we have to make the connection between the eighth precept and the ninth precept. Tham and sun, tham and sun. Does it make sense? You have to make that connection. If greed, covetousness is greed. If greed is the state of the self-ego, 自我, bản ngã, reaches out towards the non-self or non-ego, 我所, ngã sở, with the desire of appropriating, controlling, incorporating, possessing it. So we discussed last time that greed is you want to reach out, right? That's greed. You want to reach out so that you can have it yourself. So greed is reaching out, okay, with the desire to own it, to control it. Whereas hatred, sun, on the other hand, is the state that arises when that movement of reaching out is stopped or obstructed, either by the non-self or non-ego itself, or by some factors or party, meaning that we don't like it, we hate it. It no longer looks nice to us. So greed is reaching out, whereas hate is shutting out. I don't want it. Does it make sense? Right. So that we need to make that connection, because that connection allows us to see, to understand the ninth precept clearly. Greed or selfish desire, tham, is the love to preserve the object of desire for enjoyment. Right? You have greed because you want to enjoy it, whether it's a person, a relationship, a thing, whatever, even your own thoughts. You have greed because you want to enjoy it, its presence, its ownership. Hatred is the desire to destroy the object out of dissatisfaction, so that one does not have to face it ever again. So greed is I want to see it more and more. Hatred is I don't want to see it anymore. Okay, so I'm building this connection now. Hopefully you're following me. In other words, hatred is a form of desire to satisfy one's anger by destroying what is stirring up frustration. So first we have this greed to want to own it. And when we face frustration, suffering, we don't want it anymore. So it's two sides of the same coin. Greed and hatred are desire. They are two sides of the same coin. They're just different faces, but they're the same, which is the commonality is desire. One is desire to own it, the other one is desire to push it away. Yes.
The greedy is from what I thought. Greedy when you wanted something, but you can't get it and you become angry. So that's why they're related. But now saying that the one part that you want something, and then you don't want something. So how does it relate it? Because when we want something, for example, in relationship, you want to have that person in your hands, but then you try many ways, but you cannot have it, and you become very angry, and you try to destroy it. So that's why get connected. But now you can say that greedy, you want it, and then on the other side, hatred, you don't want it. So can you give example to see how they connected?
Yes. Yes, I will give an example. So, um, I have that later on, so you're jumping a little bit ahead. But yes, so the connection is desire. One is desire to have it. The other one is the desire to push it away. So that is the connection. So when in the sutra, it often says I, uh, or desire, or I, to eliminate desire. It's not just to eliminate greed, but to also eliminate hatred. So because that connection between greed and hatred is desire, desire to have it, desire to not have it, right? But I will go into that a little. Just you can hold on just a little bit, okay? But good question. Okay. So when it is said to eliminate desire, it should be understood as to eliminate selfish desire that leads to frustration, and to eliminate hatred that will obviously lead to suffering, right? So that's why we eliminate desire. It's not just greed, but also hatred, because hatred is a form of desire, right? You have the coin, heads and tails. So it's the same coin. It depends how you look at it. It's all desire. It's the same coin of desire. So greed is a desire to take in for oneself, to preserve it for enjoyment. Hatred is the desire to push it away, to destroy it. The positive counterpart of the principle of abstention from hatred, wutan, botam, would be compassion. So that's the more positive view of it. No hate, no hatred is kind of negative. That's from a negative perspective. Compassion is from the positive perspective. So we should understand both. It's not just about eliminating hatred in us, but to give rise to compassion, right? So eliminating hatred is just half the story. The other half of the story is to cultivate compassion, to be. In this case, really, be. Bei is bei because there's loving kindness, which is 慈. Compassion is bei. So the two terms are different. But in Chinese and Vietnamese, we often use the two together as one, but really they are two different parts. Loving kindness and compassion, they're two different meanings. Loving kindness, we have already used this in the first precept, no killing, right? When you are not killing somebody, you're trying to preserve that living being's life. You are essentially practicing loving kindness. So we have already used loving kindness for the first precept. So the ninth precept, we will use compassion for the positive counterpart. But the real reason why it is compassion rather than loving kindness is that the positive counterpart of abstention from hatred, wutan, votam, is to be found in the Bodhisattva ideal,菩萨道,菩萨戒, Bồ Tát đạo hoặc Bồ Tát giới. According to the sutra called Questions of Upali, which is a Mahayana sutra, 大乘经典 of the Ratnakuta class, 大宝积经 跟Đại Bảo Tích. For a bodhisattva to break precepts out of desire or greed, in the sense of 爱心, ái tâm, is a minor offense. Just 轻罪, 轻罪, 跟tội. Even if he does so for innumerable kappas, so lifetime after lifetime, he gives rise to desire, um, to break the precepts. Whereas for him, as a bodhisattva, taking on the bodhisattva vows to break precepts out of anger or hatred, 嗔恨心, tam seng heng, even once is a very serious offense, 重罪, 重tội. So a bodhisattva, I'm saying this for convenience. I'm not encouraging anybody to violate the precepts, but I'm trying to make a distinction here that the difference between the 8th precept and the 10 precepts, right? Tan and Chen, Tam và Sung. A bodhisattva out of greed or desire, out of desire to break the precepts, let's say to steal money, to help a homeless person or something like that. That's the desire to help somebody by stealing. Stealing is an offense, but there is a desire to steal from somebody to help the homeless or the poor. Whereas to kill somebody out or to hurt somebody out of hatred. And he can steal lifetime after lifetime to help somebody. From that perspective, it is still better than to hurt somebody once out of anger. The reason for that is that a bodhisattva who breaks precepts, 破戒, 法giới, out of desire, still holds sentient beings in his embrace. 還保護眾生, cũng còn bảo hộ chúng sanh. Whereas a bodhisattva who breaks precepts, 破戒, 法giới, out of hatred, forsakes sentient beings altogether. 斷滅眾生, 斷業眾生. So one is to preserve, the other one is to protect. Because the motivation of the bodhisattva is to help sentient beings. In this case, he is using unskillful means to do so. Whereas to hurt somebody out of hatred destroys our bodhisattva vows, our bodhisattva spirit. Right? Does it make sense? Any questions? Is it clear? Right? I'm trying to make a connection here. Here, elsewhere, of course, the Mahayana is not saying, right? 大乘佛教Phật Pháp Đại Thừa. It's not saying that the breaking of precepts, 破戒, 法giới, is out of desire, does not matter. It does matter. But what I'm trying to say here is that for the bodhisattva, it is the most important that he should not, under any circumstances, abandon sentient beings. 捨棄眾生, từ bỏ, không từ bỏ chúng sanh. So a bodhisattva does not abandon sentient beings. That's what makes a bodhisattva. If we give rise to a thought to abandon sentient beings, to not help anybody, we are not following through. We are not nourishing our bodhisattva ideal. Bồ Tát tâm,菩萨心. Does it make sense? Right? So that's why a bodhisattva always helps sentient beings. If that person does not help sentient beings, then that person no longer becomes a bodhisattva, 菩萨, Bồ-Tát. It doesn't matter. In this case, again, please understand my words carefully. It doesn't matter how he does it, whether he's using unskillful means, meaning 不善行為, 不thiện, hành vi bất thiện, to help somebody. Unskillful means to help somebody, he's still a bodhisattva. But if he ever has hatred in him to hurt somebody, to say, I hate you, I don't want to save you anymore, I don't even want to deal with you anymore, then that he is destroying his bodhisattva ideal, his bodhisattva heart. Does that make sense? Right? Chú có rõ không?
Tôi hiểu cái ý.
Yeah.
Nhưng mà trên cái vấn đề giải thích thì thắc mắc.
Yeah.
Nó hơi bị confused.
Cái ý tôi bảo là thế này, một người Bồ Tát hạnh á,
Yeah.
có thể hy sinh cá nhân mình,
Yeah.
chấp nhận những cái sự đau khổ,
Yeah.
nhưng vì chúng sanh,
Yeah.
chứ không phải là vì bảo vệ cái quyền lợi của một cá nhân nào đó,
Yeah.
mình phải hành động như vậy.
Yeah.
Ý tôi là như vậy.
Yeah, so a bodhisattva always sacrifices himself if as necessary. So that's a true bodhisattva. But as mundane beings, phàm phu, we are not there yet. Sometimes we do have this selfish desire to help ourselves. But that's okay because let's say you earn money, you want to earn money, and you may even borrow money to help somebody. You may take out a loan to help somebody, and you may not be able to pay back the loan, but you're helping somebody, so that's a bodhisattva spirit. Right? Tinh thần của Bồ Tát,菩萨的精神. The spirit of bodhisattva is always to help somebody, no matter how you do it. A non-bodhisattva, a person who is not a bodhisattva, is one who does not help somebody. So even if a person from another religion, they want to help somebody, that's the spirit of bodhisattva. It doesn't mean that you have to take on the bodhisattva vow, but because you have the intention, the desire to help somebody, you are a bodhisattva from that perspective. But if you say, I don't want to help anymore, I hate that person, I want him to be out of my face forever, I hate him, I want him to be destroyed, then that is no longer a bodhisattva. So I'm trying to make a connection that a bodhisattva is always looking for ways to help somebody, even if it's unskillful. Bhakti. So hatred will destroy his compassion. Son, right? Son will destroy his compassion to help sentient beings, which goes against the very nature of the bodhisattva ideal. If he stops thinking about helping sentient beings, then he stops being a bodhisattva. Simple as that. As we have discussed, intentionally unskillful deeds, or intentional unskillful deeds will likely produce karmic consequences. So a bodhisattva who steals to help somebody does not mean that he will not face the consequence. Có quả báo, karmic consequence, quả báo, của báo. So he steals to help somebody. So there is merit in helping, but there's also offense, 罪, in stealing. But because of his compassion, he's willing to face that karmic consequence to help somebody. Because his compassion is so big, so vast that he doesn't care about himself anymore, because he has no self. There's no me that will face this. I will face this, but my compassion is everything to help sentient beings. Just like a mother, a parent, willing to sacrifice for his or her children. Right? That love, that compassion. Say, as long as my children are safe, I'm willing to endure any kind of hardship. That's the bodhisattva's ideal. Hatred and compassion are mutually exclusive, meaning they cannot occur together. You cannot truly care for someone and at the same time hate them and want them to die. It does not make sense. It does not work that way. Hatred and compassion cannot exist together in your own heart. Precepts number 8 and 9, right? No greed and no hatred. Both have to be observed in order to effectively remove hatred, because you have effectively removed the foundation of selfish desire. So if you want to observe precept number 8 and 9, 18 跟 19 chảo. Nếu mà muốn trì giới thứ 9 với thứ 8 đó, we have we have to observe them together in order to eliminate hatred. The reason is that you cannot say, oh, I only want to observe number 8. I don't need to observe number 9. That's not effective. You have to do the two together in order to be effective in removing hatred. So these no greed. One is greed is the desire to control and possess. The other hatred is the desire to destroy and get rid of whatever you don't like, right? So the two. So as long as there is selfish desire, hatred is not very far behind. So to get back to your question about the connection between the two, let's take one example, one easy example to make this point clear. When a boy meets a girl and he's interested in her, meaning that there is a selfish desire to make her his own girlfriend. If she is not interested in him in return, or she cheats on him, then he will there will be hatred and anger in him. So he may even want to hurt her or hurt her new relationship with another guy to satisfy his anger. So when you have greed, you want to own it. But if you want to own it, meaning you're preventing it from changing. But it changes, therefore it leads to frustration. And now you hate it because it's giving you frustration. The very object that you think gives you happiness is now giving you suffering. And therefore, you want to get rid of it. So your love, your desire is now turning into hatred. Does it make sense? No? But if the boy has no interest in her, then it will not matter to him whom she dates, who she goes out with. It doesn't, because he has no interest in her. You read on a newspaper of some stranger getting hurt. You may feel sad, but it doesn't make you angry or upset because you don't know that person on the newspaper. But if it was your family member getting badly hurt in a hit and run car accident, and you knew who it was with evidence, video camera recording and all that, but the police ignored your plea, they didn't even want to look into your case, you would get angry of the injustice, right? You would get angry, but now, because it's now personally involved. Tibetan Buddhism has a popular story. A person is walking along the street, and he hears some strange noise in a distance. Out of curiosity, he walks closer to see what's going on. And then he sees a group of people shouting and yelling. And out of curiosity again, he walks closer. So walking closer, he sees them pounding their fists, hitting something. Walking even closer to see what they are doing, he realizes that they are surrounding a person, hitting that person lying on the ground with sticks, right? Pounding that person in the middle. When he finally realizes, when he gets to see what's really going on, he sees that it is his own grandmother that is being hit. He now gives rise to hatred for those people. From a distance, without knowing what was going on, he may have had curiosity, but he had no love or hatred for those people because he didn't know what was going on. But as soon as he knew what was going on, his love for his grandmother turned into hatred for those who had hurt her. Does it make sense? Does that answer your question? So when I say greed to take in, hatred to push away, is because we have this desire to have. Whenever you have the desire to have something, you will have hatred to push it away. Because the very object that is giving you joy, will give you suffering. And that's why you want to push it away. And it is all because of desire. The desire to take in, and because of the desire to push it out. Shakespeare, in his book, he says that a unfilial son, con bất hiếu, 不孝顺的孩子. Unfilial son is as sharp as a tooth of a serpent, like a big snake. It hurts. When you love your child so much, you're willing to give the whole world to your child. And the child turns out to be a bastard. It turns out to be unfilial. Bất hiếu. It hurts. Right? Your desire to love somebody turns out to be a knife that strikes you in the heart. Right? So it is all because of desire. And that's because it is so painful, don't want to even look at his face anymore. And that's why you're pushing it away. And it is all because of desire. Does it make sense? Yes. Yeah, just nói.
Tôi nghĩ thế này nha.
Yeah.
Không biết là đúng sai. Cái việc giữa cái ái hay là cái yêu đó, với cái hận á, cái ghét á. Nếu mà một người mà mình gọi là không có học Phật, hay là một người phàm phu, thì nó cũng như một đồng tiền hai mặt, cái anh nói. Thì mình cái chỉ là để mặt này thì nó hiện mặt này, nhưng mà lại đi giấu cái mặt kia. Mình thương người đó thì ở phía sau đó là mình có thể có cơ hội mình ghét người đó, nhưng mà nó chưa có cái duyên, nó chưa có đến cái thời gian nào đó. Thì đó là cái tôi quan sát như vậy. Nhưng mà một người Bồ Tát hạnh ấy, đối cái phần mình nói là cái thương và cái ghét đi, thì nó là một cân hai đầu. Có nghĩa là nếu mà mình trì cái lòng thương mình nặng á, thì nó sẽ đánh bật cái lòng ghét nó đi. Thì mình thấy rõ ràng nó là một cái sự action trước mặt, mà lúc nào mình cũng có coi được cả hai mặt, chứ không phải chỉ đơn mặt mà thôi. Cái đó là cái sự tôi cảm thấy vậy. Thì anh có thể thông dịch lại, mà anh có thể đánh giá cái sự quan sát của tôi.
Chú nói rất là chính xác, cảm ơn chú. So he mentioned that love, hatred, and desire are two sides of the same coin, like we mentioned. And he said, but to a mundane being, a phạm phu, and it's two sides of the same coin. But to a bodhisattva, he said, it's like a balance, that the more loving kindness you have, compassion you have, the less hatred you have. And that is very true. True from, I think, only one angle. Because if you were to use a balance, then you could say the other way. The more hatred you have, the loving kindness you have. And that's true for a mundane being, phạm phu. But a bodhisattva doesn't have hatred. That bodhisattva no longer has hatred. So that example works only from one perspective, not the entire perspective. So we should be careful when we use examples, and we should clarify that. So some people may misunderstand when we use similes, examples. But a bodhisattva no longer has I, me, 无我, vô ngã. And therefore, he doesn't hate. He doesn't love because there's something in return. He has no reason for being happy. He has no reason for being compassionate, meaning that he doesn't need somebody to give him benefits in order for him to be nice. For example, we as human beings, phạm phu, we are compassionate towards others because they are kind to us. When our children are cute, filial, hiếu thảo,孝順, then we are willing to give the whole world to our children. But as soon as they turn their backs on us, we hate them. So that's mundane beings. So that's mundane being. But a bodhisattva doesn't have that. He has no selfish motivation. He helps somebody because it's the right thing to do, not because that person is a good person or a bad person. He only sees that person needs help. A bodhisattva will jump in to help, whether he is Asian, Hispanics, what we don't care, animals. He helps because that being needs help, not because he can relate to that person. No, that person needs help. The right thing to do is to help that person. The bodhisattva will jump in to help. And so the bodhisattva is always positive, compassion. There's no hatred. So you don't need to balance it in order to eliminate something, because there is nothing to eliminate. There is no hatred to eliminate. So yes, your example of the balance is correct from the mundane beings, 凡夫's perspective. But from a bodhisattva perspective, there's no balance because there is no hatred there to be eliminated. Câu hỏi, does it make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Tại vì tôi đem cái cân đó làm cái ví dụ đó, là trước nhất là mình thấy được hai đầu, biết đầu nặng đầu nhẹ, nhưng mà cái quan trọng đó là gọi là cái tâm của cái cân. Mình đặt làm sao cho nó công bằng thì mình sẽ gọi là mình sẽ là trì hoãn được cái sự bình đẳng của hai bên. Đó. Không vì cái sự yêu của mình mà đi hận người ta, không có vì cái hận của mình trở thành cái sự hối tiếc hay là cái sự hối hận của mình, những cái hành động của mình, thì cái đó là cái Bồ Tát hạnh, là lúc nào là vô ngã, là tôi đặt chính giữa, tôi coi được hai mặt.
He said that, you know, he uses the balance as an example to maintain that balance, and we should not have. It's not because we have hatred for others, but what I'm trying to clarify here is when we use the balance, meaning two sides, right? Balance goes up when one's heavy, this one's lighter, this one's heavy, this one's light. The only exception I'm taking to that example is because you still have that hatred under balance. That's why you need to balance it. But Bodhisattva has no hatred, so there's really nothing to balance. Bodhisattva only has a true Bodhisattva only has compassion, so there is no hatred to balance. So to balance is still on the way. Yes, it is very applicable to us. We need to maintain that balance because we have not yet removed hatred. Therefore, we need to add more compassion to balance it out. We don't want hatred to be heavy. We want compassion to be heavy, and make this hatred lighter and lighter until it disappears. And therefore, when it disappears, you only have compassion. So a true Bodhisattva with no self, 无我, vô ngã, has no hatred. And so there is nothing to balance. Yes.
At the beginning, you were using example the love of mother is unconditioned. Even though the kid is become bad, become a poison snake, no matter her love to him or her love to that kid is still the same. She won't hate because the kid become bad. So that's considered as bodhisattva love. So it doesn't matter to take the precept or not, or take the vows or not, but the love of the mother is always there to represent bodhisattva. I just want to clarify for that.
Yes. So love of a mother is just an example, but in reality, it's very difficult to find a mother who truly, unconditionally loves her children, because there's always the selfish desire that the son or the daughter will grow up to take care of me, right? I'm putting my time, I'm investing in this person, this newborn being, so that people won't criticize me, because in society, If I don't have children, people are going to criticize me. If I'm not married, people are going to criticize me. And when you get married, to avoid the criticism, you have to have children, because if you don't have children, people are going to criticize me. I'm incapable of bearing children. And so some people have children because to avoid criticism. In fact, majority of the people, if not all people. So we're using example because it's easy to understand. And yes, it's very easy to understand that a mother's love for children is unconditional. It's very easy to understand. But in reality, it's not that way. So we're trying to use that example to illustrate a bodhisattva's compassion. And yes, you're correct, that a bodhisattva's compassion is like a mother's love to her child, newborn child. It's very precious. And the bodhisattva always protects the sentient beings, just like the mother protecting the newborn baby from harm. Yes, that's true. Okay. So here, going back to the story of the person, without knowing anybody, starts to doesn't have any kind of feelings, but as soon as he realizes that his own grandma is being mistreated by other people, then he gets upset. Here, I'm not saying that we should not have compassion just because we are afraid that it will give rise to hatred. I'm not saying that we should not have desire because we are afraid of hatred from arising. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm trying to say is that the underlying state of both greed and hatred, tan and chun, is desire, just like we talked about. It's the same coin. The desire to take in and the desire to push it out. Desire to take in is greed, tan. Desire to push it away is chun or sun. Right? If there is desire for someone, if we are not mindful, hatred will surface, will follow. If we have desire, hatred will follow. Love and hate are two sides of the same coin of desire. I, like we just mentioned. One is the desire for existence, 常见, 特经. The other is the desire for non-existence, 断见, 短经. So greed is the desire to exist, to last forever. Hatred is the desire to not exist, to end it forever. So these two extreme views are wrong. 邪见, 打经. This takes us to the last precept, the 10th precept, no false view. Before we proceed, are there any other comments or questions about the first two mental precepts of no greed and no hatred? Okay. The 10th precept is abstention from false view. 不吃空隙昧. In terms of unskillful mental action, the Buddha explains as follows. He has wrong view and is warped in the way he sees things. There is nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed. There is no fruit or result of good or bad actions. There is no this world, no next world, no mother, no father, no spontaneously reborn beings, no contemplatives or Brahmins who, faring rightly and practicing rightly, proclaim this world and the next after having directly known and realized it for themselves. This is how one is made impure in three ways by mental action. So this is kind of cryptic because we're using English to translate sutras, and some of the texts we may not be very familiar with. But anyways, the details are not important. But what I'm trying to say here is that false view is not seeing things clearly. A person who has So this is unskillful, 不善. And then the second is skillful, 善. It's just the opposite. I won't go into details because of lack of time. What is meant by false view and how are they to be abandoned? 如何消除邪见? Làm sao mà diệt trừ tà kiến? The Pali term for which false views is generally accepted rendering as miccha ditti. So miccha ditti, that's in Pali. Miccha means wrong or false. 邪 or ta. Ditti means view, belief, dogma, theory, especially false theory, groundless or unfounded opinion. So together, miccha ditti is false view. Buddhism identifies many kinds of false view, 邪见, 打经. In the sutra, Mahajala Sutra, 梵网经跟梵文, the Buddha lists 62 false views altogether in this sutra. Examples of false views include everything is made by God, everything is the result of fate and destiny, everything happens just by chance. It's just coincidence, nothing, no conditions whatsoever, they just happen. So that is a false view. So you look at in this sutra, there are a total of 62 false views that the Buddha lists. When you practice right view, 正见, 真念, you purify your mind of these three wrong views and more. You see that when things happened, they happened because of certain definite causes and conditions. 一切都是缘起，tất cả đều là duyên khởi. And this is true not only of the external world around you, but also of your own mind. If you control the cause, you control the effect, right? The yin and guo. So if you control the cause, you can control the effect. And in this way, you see that you can gain control over your own life, and that you can develop, you can grow in the way that you want by controlling the cause and giving it the right conditions. Then you will have the desired result, the desired effect. The Buddha did not agree with the wrong view that everything is made by God. Not that he wanted to offend other religions, but he wanted them to realize that they were blindly following something that they did not know about or have experience of. The ego, 自我, bản ngã, it likes suitable conditions to maintain its existence. As long as we are controlled by our ego, 自我, bản ngã, we like new cars, we like friends who are nice to us. We try to avoid the negative conditions because the favorable conditions allow the ego to grow, to exist. The ego does not like uncertainties in life. It wants to make sure that it knows why things happen. One way to overcome uncertainties is to have answers to life. Thousands of years ago, humans survived primarily by farming, right? They grow food. When natural events happen, such as rain, thunders, and bad weathers, they did not know what caused them to occur. We now know that some natural events happen through scientific discoveries, but they did not back then. The easiest way for them to answer those questions about life was to believe that some powerful being created them. Very easy to answer the questions. This way, they were not troubled by why things happened, and they could go on living their lives and taking care of their daily business and family without having to worry about why thunders happen why big rain happened. Back in the ancient days, and it is still true today, that they would sacrifice hundreds of animals to appease the powerful God, to make the powerful God happy, the creator of all things, and pray that natural disasters would not happen. Right? So they cúng tế, they sacrifice, they kill animals to sacrifice to the God who they believe created everything, even natural disasters. If the natural disaster dissipated, they would say that their prayers to God worked. If they were not successful, they would say that it was God's will. The Buddha disagreed and said it was people's unskillful deeds that misfortunes happened. It wasn't because of somebody giving them disaster, but because of their unskillful 不善 业 that created natural disasters, misfortunes for them. In Dhammapada, Phả Chư Kinh, Kinh Pháp Cú, verse 1, the Buddha says, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows even as the cart wheel follows the hoof of the ox. Verse number 1. People were delusional with their wrong views, thinking their misfortunes were caused by some almighty creator, some powerful God. In other words, they took no responsibility of their own actions. Instead of being responsible and doing kind deeds, they pray for forgiveness out of fear. There's a saying in Buddhism, deluded beings are afraid of karmic consequences, while enlightened beings are afraid of karmic causes. 众生为果，菩萨为因。chúng sanh sợ quả, Bồ Tát sợ nhân. Deluded beings, 凡夫 are often unaware and don't see the connections between actions and consequences. They don't see that actions have consequences. They only cry for help when their unskillful deeds, 不善业 have come to fruition, which is when it's already too late. And they start to have regrets and pray to the Buddhas or the gods for help. It's already too late. On the other hand, enlightened beings, 菩萨 Bồ Tát, are very well aware aware that actions have consequences, and so they are very careful not to do unskillful deeds, 不善业 in order to avoid painful consequences. Similarly, deluded beings don't see karmic rewards, 福报 in helping others. As a result, they become more selfish and egoistic. Bodhisattvas, 菩萨 Bồ Tát, see helping others as helping themselves. Therefore, wherever they go, they bring joy and happiness with them to share with others. Deluded beings live a life of fear, whereas bodhisattvas live a life of fearlessness and joy. The Buddha again in Dhammapada, Phả Chư Kinh, Kinh Pháp Cú, verses 188 and 189 said, many people out of fear flee for refuge to sacred hills, woods, groves, trees, and shrines. And then in verse 189, in reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge is not release from all suffering. This is an example of blind faith and not taking responsibility for one's actions, one's deeds. It is easier to look for help from outside to solve their problems, whom they can just blindly follow, and it may give them temporary relief. Right? It's much easier to go pray to the Buddha than to practice to observe the precepts, 持戒, 止giới, ourselves. Believing that a super being, the Almighty God, Creator, who's responsible for what's happening to them and can solve all the problems, while they themselves do not want to put in the efforts to change their unskillful actions, is false view. If we don't change ourselves, if we are not observing the precepts and we are not practicing kindness, but we pray to the Buddha for protection, then that is false view. 邪见, 打经. This is what the Buddha says about spiritual immaturity. In Fa Chi Ching again, in Dhammapada, verse 69, the Buddha says, so long as it has not ripened, the spiritually immature one thinks sin as sweet as honey, but when sin does ripen, then the spiritually immature one suffers a downfall. Month after month, a spiritually immature person may eat his food with the tip of a blade of sacred kusa grass, yet his worth is not a fraction of those who have ascertained the truth. I didn't get the Chinese translation for this, didn't have time. Sorry about that. But here, what the Buddha is trying to say is that a spiritually immature likes to pray and likes to enjoy his merits, 福报, but never cares about cultivating. Here, ascertaining the truth, meaning to realize the truth, to study, to really put into practice, but only to pray. So that's an immature person. What is right view? To understand false view, it helps us to understand right view. And I'm going a little bit too long here, but please bear with me. We will end in about 15 minutes. Referring to Dhammapada, verse 190, Fa Chi Ching again. The Buddha says, he who goes for refuge to the enlightened one, to the truth, and to the spiritual community, and who sees the perfect wisdom for the four arrant truths. And that is right view. When we believe in the Four Noble Truths, 是圣谛, 德有德. When one has right view, one can see reality and have control over one's life. Okay, so right view is to understand reality clearly and not just to pray to help an external force to help us. Are there any comments or questions on wrong view before we continue? Okay, I think it's kind of straightforward. Right? Michaditi, 邪见, 打经, false view, means in the first place a wrong or false view, in the sense of a wrong or false way of seeing. So the first is wrong way of seeing. That's what constitutes false view. It's not seeing reality clearly. And in the second place, a wrong or false view in terms of wrong doctrine, principle, or teaching. 错误的道理, right? 道理sai lầm. So false view consists of two components. One is to not see things clearly. The other one is based on wrong teaching. What makes the view or the doctrine wrong or false, 道理, 错误, 道理sai lầm, is the fact that it is an expression of the mental state contaminated by greed and hatred, as well as delusion, 贪嗔痴三毒, 贪毒贪生死, meaning that our view is contaminated by the three poisons: greed, anger, and delusion. On the other hand, what makes a view right, true, or perfect is when the expression of the mental state, when we say something, when we think about something, when we do something, that's an expression of our mental state. It's not contaminated by greed, anger, or delusion. 无贪, chân sư the kan phả. Cái thấy của mình không có bị ảnh hưởng của ba động tham sân si. Does that make sense? Right? Right view, false view. Right? False view is contaminated by the three poisons. Wrong view is contaminated by the three poisons. Right view is not contaminated by the three poisons. In other words, it is an expression of the enlightened consciousness, 觉悟, giác ngộ, which sees things as they really are. What makes a view right? Not in terms of wrong or right or false or true. A right view is beyond wrong and right. But the view is consistent with conditionality, 跟缘起法相应, tương ứng với pháp duyên khởi. So when our view is consistent with conditionality, 缘起法, you have pháp duyên khởi, then our view is right. So it's not that because I'm more powerful, I have more influence, I'm always right. That makes my view right. It's not that. It's when our view is consistent with conditionality, 缘起法, then that is right view. And what does that mean? It means to recognize that all phenomena are ultimately dissatisfactory, impermanent, and insubstantial. 一切法都是苦、无常、无我. Tất cả pháp đều là khổ, vô thường, vô ngã. Right view is also a non-view, no view, because it's not biased towards any view, subjectively wrong or subjectively right. For example, a person who hurts me, who steals from me, I can be upset at that person. I can punish that person because I'm right to do so. I have the right to do so because, and you all recognize that that person has, let's say, has stolen from me, has violated some law. We should punish that person. Punishing that person is say, this is the right thing to do. This is my view. I should punish him. We should punish him. That view may be right, but it is not the right view that in Buddhism. Does it make sense? Right? So that view is not right because it is consistent with the law of the land to punish that person, but that does it may be right from the law's perspective, but it does not make that view right view from the Buddhist perspective. Buddhist perspective is that the view has to be consistent with conditionality, 缘起法, 法缘開. No view does not mean no thinking, no seeing, or blind seeing, but rather it is not contaminated by any unskillful mental states, 不善的意业, meaning it's not contaminated by unskillfulness, 不善业, 不體業. In the sutra, the Buddha gives examples to Kunda the silversmith, a number of false views. Just like in this sutra, just to give you examples of different false view where there is nothing given, nothing to offer, no fruit or result of good or bad actions, meaning no consequences for our actions. People don't see that. There are many people in this world see, after this life, there's nothing. If I do good to people, it doesn't help me. Well, so why should I be good? So they don't see the consequences of their actions. Or they may steal and think that they are above the law, right? There are people who think they are above the law, so they go out and they offend other people. They kill, they steal, because they are behind a big corporation. And so they think they are above the law, that they can get away with it. So the Buddha said that's wrong view. They may feel justified that, hey, I worked hard, I sacrificed for this country, therefore I deserve such and such. They may think they're right, but it is not right view. Okay? No spontaneously reborn beings, meaning this is 化生, 化san. For example, like heaven beings. They don't believe there's heaven. So in this sutra, the Buddha lists many different false views. Okay. So since false views are the result of, and the results and crystallizations of unskillful mental states, 贪嗔的成形，贪恨果贪生息. So our false view is because of the result of, because it has come to fruition, it has come to crystallization, 成形, 贪恨, of our greed, anger, and delusion. This is best done, and so we understand now, right, why we have false views, because of greed, anger, and delusion. The most effective way of abandoning, removing false view, eliminating false view, 消除邪见, 丢除打kiến, is by eradicating the unskillful mental states by which they are produced. Does it make sense? The foundation of false view is greed, anger, and delusion. Therefore, to remove false view, to eliminate false view, we have to eliminate greed, anger, and delusion, the three poisons. So how do we do this? This is best done with the help of meditation. It is not just sitting and enjoying meditative bliss, 禅悦, 体悦, and magically you have right view. That's not what it means here. There is a process to eliminate false view. For example, when one is in sitting meditation and one has meditative bliss, very joyful, 念佛, 念佛, whatever method, you sit in meditation and you are very peaceful, very relaxed, very joyful. Your mental state at this point is very positive. 正面, very positive, because you're very happy. That's positive, which makes it easier to prevent and eradicate unskillful mental states. 贪嗔痴, 贪生气. Right? When you are happy, you don't think about, you are not allowing greed, anger, and delusion, at least greed and anger, to arise. The second, so I'm going through the process. This is just an example, a process of how to eliminate wrong view. The second thing is that we should raise our level of consciousness, 提高警觉, 提高感觉, to achieve an uninterrupted flow of skillful mental states of increasing purity and intensity. So while you're sitting in meditation, don't just enjoy the meditation, but put in the effort so that your skillful mental state, 善业, 停意, 善意, comes in continuously, uninterrupted. With the intensity and focus, one observes reality, sees reality, understanding all phenomena are ultimately dissatisfactory, impermanent, and insubstantial. 一切法都是苦、无常、无我. Tất cả pháp đều là khổ, vô thường, vô ngã. To uncover our wisdom of conditionality, 空正见, 空真kiến. Right? So you sit in meditation, you just don't enjoy it, but you allow your positive mental state to make yourself soft, to make yourself flexible for positivity to come to fruition. And then you observe reality, that all phenomena are dissatisfactory, impermanent, and insubstantial. So that's one way of overcoming wrong view. Does that make sense? Any comments? Okay. And then another way is to study the Dharma. So we can see clearly, so that we can differentiate between what is wrong doctrine, 错误的道理, and what is right doctrine, right? 正道理. Okay, I have 5 more minutes. And then another way to overcome a false view is that we should be acutely aware. We should become very aware of our own thinking, our thoughts and actions, right? What we think, what we say, and what we do. Have awareness in the things that we do in our daily lives. Whether it is being influenced by false views, as the example of the Buddha gave. For example, sometimes we go through life, our daily lives, we think wrongly. We say, this should be mine. I want to have this happiness. Right? I want this to be with me forever. That's wrong view, and we don't have awareness. Đề cao cảnh giác, chỉ cao警觉. We don't have awareness that we are putting in false views all the time and that what we do, what we say, what we think are not consistent with conditionality, 缘起法. And therefore, we are leaning towards wrong view, but without knowing. So it helps to correct ourselves back by paying attention to what we say, what we do, what we think. Does it make sense? Right? Secondly, have awareness of our thinking and our expressions. Then secondly, we must realize that false views are the product of unskillful mental states. 贪嗔痴的烦恼, 烦恼, 国贪生死. The reasons we have wrong view is because of greed, anger, and delusion. Right? When we are angry at somebody, or we have the desire for something, we are reinforcing, we are nurturing the wrong view. Does it make sense? If not abandoned, it will obstruct our path to enlightenment. Okay, so luckily I'm ending on time. Are there any comments or questions about the 3 mental precepts? Okay, so let's summarize today's discussions and the 3 mental precepts, the last 3 precepts of 十善业, 十善业道, 十善业道. We have spent a few weeks to discuss the 10 precepts, 十善业, 十善业. In detail, we talked about the relationship between going for refuge, 皈三宝, and observing the precepts, 持戒, 止业. We talked about the sources of the 10 precepts, where they came from, with sutras, 一部经有十善业. And then we talked about precepts as principles of ethics, 道理. And then precepts as rules of training, to practice how to implement those 10 precepts. We have dedicated considerable amount of time to talk about the 10 precepts in detail because they provide a complete ethical behavior comprising of body, speech, and mind. These 10 precepts cover everything that we do, how we live our lives. We should strive to be 100% Buddhist, not 95% or even 99% Buddhist. What does this mean? It means that we should not just study Buddhism mechanically, 在形式上的修行, 都很真很特, without changing our unskillful minds and harmful habits. Does it make sense? We come here to Dharma Assembly 法会. We even recite the sutras at home. We even chant Amida. But we are not changing our mind. We are not getting rid of the 3 mental states. So we are not being truly 100% Buddhist. Does it make sense? So we should try our best to be 100% Buddhist. We're not perfect, but we should have mindfulness in removing the 3 poisons. We should maximize our potentials as Buddhists to live a moral life that leads to joy and wisdom. It can only be joyful if we know what we're doing and we want to do so. If you don't have joy in what you do, you will not last very long. So in order for us to be truly Buddhist, a long-term Buddhist, we have to observe the precepts and find joy in observing the precepts. 持戒, 止业. It's not to 让步, it's not to 束缚, to restrict ourselves through the observance of precepts, but we should find joy in observing the precepts. 持戒, 止业. If we want to achieve spiritual liberations and enlightenment, we should uphold the precepts, 持戒, 己giới. Wisdom cannot be uncovered in the state of unskillfulness, 不善业, 不停業, and mental confusion, 迷惑顛倒, 迷惑顛倒, but only in the state of skillfulness and concentration. Does it make sense? That is why we have to observe the precepts. A true Buddhist is not one who goes for refuge to the three jewels, 皈依三宝, 皈依三宝, but also observes the 5 precepts as a minimum. Traditionally, precept observance, 持戒, 己giới, is the foundation of the Buddhist study, the traditional progress in the threefold study, including precept, samadhi, and prajna, 三学, 戒, 定, 慧, giới định tuệ, tam hạnh. Because there are Buddhists who follow the threefold study of precept, meditation, and wisdom, that Buddhism continues to exist. Buddhism does not exist in books, but in our lives. A Buddhist is one who takes refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and observes at least 5 precepts. We express our aspiration for enlightenment by leading a life that is consistent with the Buddhist principles. Okay, so we can see from illustration here that 皈三寶, 皈三寶, the 3 jewels, is the foundation of Buddhism. And precepts, these columns here, there are 10 columns today we talked about, the 10 precepts. These columns support what is above us, and that is to support our meditation, meditative mind. And this meditation is what allows us to have wisdom. So in this structure here is Buddhism. It's not one piece. We cannot have wisdom without meditation, without precepts, without going for refuge. So that's not Buddhism. Enlightenment is not just going for refuge, but enlightenment, we have to practice. We have to follow through, walk towards enlightenment in order to achieve enlightenment. So without a strong foundation, this structure here can collapse easily. We study for 10 years, 20 years, but we don't observe the precepts. We only go refuge to the 3 jewels, 皈依三寶, 皈依三寶. But we're not sitting in meditation. We don't practice meditation. We don't practice wisdom. Then whatever we study will fall because it does not have a strong foundation. Or if you study meditation but you don't observe the precepts, you don't go for refuge, then you're not going to achieve enlightenment. Does that make sense? Okay. In other words, if we don't observe the precepts, it will be very difficult to maintain progress of our practice.